This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
This is George Newbern, the voice of Superman.
And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Welcome, everyone, to a very special bonus episode of the DCAU Review. I'm Liam. With me, as he always is Cal. And Cal, it's a holiday weekend here in the States, at least. And so because of that, we are taking a week off from a regular review and instead bringing our listeners part one of a very exciting conversation that we recently had with one of really the true founding fathers of the DCAU as a whole, and by extension, this very podcast, when you think about it.
Yes, while he wasn't directly involved with or even aware that this podcast existed, more than likely before the conversation, he is indirectly responsible for its existence. As we had a conversation with one of the most important figures in the history. Ultimately, it's the DCAU, but really he worked on Batman the Animated Series, which obviously birthed the DCAU. And it's one of the big names that honestly feels like a little bit like an unsung hero at times. I think when people think of Batman the Animated Series, as far as like the thumbprints or the, leaving a lasting impact here, oftentimes it's Bruce Timm, of course, it's Paul Dini, Alan Burnett might be included in that conversation, but really the fourth guy who we have the pleasure of speaking with on today's episode, who is also a co-creator and largely, as we'll discuss here, is responsible for one of the defining things about the show, and that is the look of the show. And I think to this date, we talk about it in our episode today, but a lot of times when people watch Batman the Animated Series for the first time or revisit it for the first time in a long time, they talk about the way that the show itself looks. And we've been beating around the bush here, so I'll just say we have on the show today Eric Radomski, co-creator of Batman the Animated Series. He also is a producer, director of a few different episodes. And I'm very excited to chat with him today, Liam. We got to sit down with him for what ended up being quite an extended period of time, so much that we have to split it into two different parts here. So it's he was very generous with his time, a very humble, kind human being, and very excited to discuss some of the things that we have on board today.
Absolutely, Cal. We can't say enough good things about Eric, who has launched his own website as well as is making an appearance. We'll let him tell you about that himself in a little bit here, but absolutely. Just an absolutely fantastic conversation with Eric. As you said, a very humble guy. But yes, here in part one of our very exciting two-part conversation with Eric, we're going to get into his origins of getting into the television and animation industry, as well as some of the earliest influences, some of the earliest movie influences he had that sort of maybe seeped their way in, even subconsciously, into Batman the Animated Series, as well as Cal said, the creation and the overall look of the show, which Eric was incredibly instrumental in. And quite a few great behind the scenes conversations await you in part one here. So without any further ado, let's throw it to ourselves in the past with special guest Eric Radomski. Thanks, ourselves from the future. As mentioned, we are very lucky to be joined today by the great Eric Radomski. Of course, Eric was the lead producer, one of the lead producers on the Batman the Animated Series, and maybe 9, 10, 11 other cartoons as well along the ways here. But obviously, being the DCAU Review, we're very excited to have Eric on to talk about his history. So, Eric, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. I'm really flattered that you guys asked me to be part of this. I've checked out your site and some of the other podcasts with the compadres and others, and you guys do great work. And I'm glad to be considered part of the collective. So,
Thank
very
you
cool.
so much. We appreciate that. It's high praise for us, but it's really our pleasure to have you. Before we even get into questions, just want to say, as I said in our brief dialogue and setting up the interview, Batman the Animated Series means so much to Liam and I. Growing up, and I realized today when we were thinking about it, Liam doesn't know a world where Batman the Animated Series doesn't exist because he was born a year after it debuted.
Wow.
So
January 93. So yeah,
Oh
just about 3
my.
months after it hit the airwaves, I guess.
but growing up, it was such a pivotal part for us. It obviously set the tone for our love for superheroes. It introduced us to superheroes. It gave us a passion for Batman. It set the precedent for what superhero storytelling should be. And a lot of that has to do with the hard work that you put into this. So we're super excited to do this. And we still, some 20, 30 years later, we're now doing a podcast talking about it. So that says something about the staying powers, for
Sure. And
what this
that is always stunning to me. Every time I hear it, it still triggers me that we could be having a conversation about something from 35 years ago now. But
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys enjoyed it, and all the fans that support it and keep it alive. Like anything, if it's good quality, people love it. I'm grateful and glad to have been part of it. It's pretty cool.
So with our first question for you before we get into the Batman the animated series of it all is we'd love to just hear about what first sort of sparked your interest growing up in art and animation, and then from there how did you go about breaking into the industry and making it your career?
Sure. Well, I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, very much a blue collar, poor kid, not whining, but it just is what it is. Working class family. All of my uncles were in the steel industry. My dad was a truck driver. I had four older brothers. I was the baby of the family. Polish immigrants from both sides. My grandparents from both sides immigrated from Poland. So I'm a thoroughbred, which is yeehaw,
Yeah.
Poland and Cleveland.
We're also fellow Polish.
Oh,
Said it's also our grandparents, our great grandparents came over here. So we're
Nastrovia.
yes, absolutely.
Great.
Jeszcze
So,
Polska nie zginęła.
so it was very much, grew up under the guide of my brothers and what they liked and did. Because I was the youngest, I had, probably more of mom's attention. So I was a reader when I was young. She had me in a sort of a book club, so I'd get books every couple of weeks. They were children's books, and loved reading. Most of them were obviously cartoony, sort of illustrated books, and the artwork always just appealed to me. Didn't understand a bit of it. Never exposed to art. I didn't have any family members that were artists. It was all this, I had assumed I would be working in the steel industry as I got older. So that was just sort of my own interest for the books. And then certainly, I'm old enough to be back in the days of 3 network television stations and, watching reruns of stuff that had been made, 20, 30 years earlier. Classic Warner Brothers, and occasionally, The Wonderful World of Disney. Always hoped and prayed that there would be an animation day, but it was, it seemed that, 5 out of 6 times it would be some live action thing that I could give a shit about. And I'm like, then when the animation would come on, it was probably the best exposure, because even as it doesn't seem practical, but even back then, because I grew up in the late, through the 60s and 70s, I just didn't go to the theater much. We just didn't go. We couldn't afford to go necessarily. When we did, it was rare. So I didn't get to see Disney animation in the theaters. Whatever my exposure was television. So all the reruns of Hanna-Barbera, Warner Brothers, and whatever, sitcoms, TV shows, my brothers and I, again, having 4 older brothers, it was I don't know how my mom raised us. It was a rock'em sock'em house. But the Stooges, the Rascals, loved all of it and just ate it up because that was all we had access to. And then, it was the days where you were in the evenings to watch television, after your parents yell at you to come in because it was getting dark. But hung out with friends in the neighborhood. So we played, played Army, played war. I was fortunate enough to live across the street from my public high school, but it was there was the original school was there. There's an alarm going by. Okay, there you go. Uh, Originally, the high school was being torn down and a new one built. So it was a playground. It was a construction site for 2 years. We played in the mud and the trenches and, GI Joes. And, it was, so the point being, I was exposed to a lot more of the sort of practical friendships and friends. Sports was a big thing in Ohio. So my brothers played sports in high school and, just the local baseball and Pee Wee football. And, that was more of my exposure. So the comic book side of things, I can honestly say, I don't even remember knowing there were such things as comic books. I knew of Mad Magazine, which was cool.
Right.
And I did that. And so, coming from that tight knit family with older brothers that love to harass the shit out of me, it was all about the comedy and about the fun.
Sure.
So I was always leaning into that direction more than anything else. Now, contrary to what I said about going to the movies, I remember distinctly two of my friends, they're best friends. I still am friends with them since I was in grade school.
Wow.
We were able to, I don't know, how it works. It sounds like a movie itself. We were able to sneak into the local theater, which is on 55th and Broadway, used to be called the Olympia Theater. And we saw The Godfather. And we were only 11 years old.
Oh my goodness.
So we were able to get in, and obviously, for the horror of it all, the violence. But I distinctly remember when Sonny, had he went and he took one of the bridesmaids, and they had an affair. We'll keep it clean. That was, so my friends and I, after seeing that movie in that theater, all the way home, because we had to walk back home, and it was a couple miles from where we lived, we suddenly became gangsters. It was the coolest thing in the world. But I think that, and I didn't know it at the time, but I think that influence of the drama and, obviously the art direction, that absolutely played into my, my contribution for Batman. But I didn't carry it around like someday I'm going to use this.
Yeah.
I know that there was a big impact. That was a big movie that just, it spoke to me. It was, it's the neighborhood, because Cleveland had its own, everybody had their little factions of the mob. So I remember hearing stories about the mob and not only in the news, but, friends of friends, because my dad was in the union and they talked about Jimmy Hoffa at the time. So all of that was just, I just had this whole different sort of experience growing up, and it was just, that was natural to me. So I leaned comedy. I thought, I loved the Warner Brothers stuff so much. Hanna-Barbera, tried to figure out how the hell do they make these, let alone people actually get paid to do this. I know that's a lot of the animators say that. But once I did my research, literally actually going down to the library and pulling books and, actually figuring it out, then, it all made sense. I thought it was great. And then the next, reality slapped me in the face where it's like, but you live in Cleveland. It's like, you can't do this. This is all done somewhere else. So, that was the next challenge as to, well, maybe I can at least become an illustrator or an artist and, somehow figure it out as I go. So that's a big nutshell of sort of my early influences and beginnings, and the exposure to, the Adam West Batman. It was factored in. So it sort of fell into that same category of it was obviously campy, but it was sort of comedic, but it wasn't funny enough to be as funny as Abbott and Costello.
Right.
Sure.
It's not slapstick, right?
Yeah, it wasn't there. So I didn't appreciate the campy humor, and it wasn't serious enough to take as like drama. So we'd watch it, and we'd joke about it, but it was like, oh, that's Batman. So I'd never looked beyond that. So that's my own ignorance to what, Batman was really about. So go on. I studied, I think I had like 2 semesters of actual art after high school. I had a high school art class, but I couldn't afford anything. The school I went to, it was like a commercial art school in Cleveland. 2 semesters and the school closed down. So I was like, what the F? It's like
They took the money and ran.
I live in the wrong place. The school closed down. I can't get an education. What am I going to do? Through different, attempts and, my passion to figure out how and what and where, this is where the rambling is. So I can appreciate your patience with it.
Of course.
But oddly enough, there was back then, a lot of cities had their own sort of Friday night movie hosts. Ours was Chuck Shadowski, and he was a Polish guy, and it was called Big Chuck and Houlihan. Then Houlihan was the local weather guy, but they would team up on Friday night, show the 50s horror movies, and they'd, take breaks on commercials and do comedy and then come back to the movie. Eventually, Houlihan got replaced by Little John, which was a little person, and they became a comedy duo. But all of Chuck's humor was Polish related. So he had one of his characters was called the Kielbasi Kid. So he was a fake cowboy that had kielbasa as his guns, and just stupid, funny.
Yeah.
And that story, because oddly enough, my oldest brother worked for a carpeting company. So installing carpeting, cleaning carpeting. One of his coworkers was Chuck Shadowski's brother, of all things. So yeah, small world. So that didn't, it was like, oh wow, Chuck Shadowski's brother, it's like, and he's just a local guy, but it was a big deal to me. I'm
sure,
like, yeah. So eventually, as I got high school years, probably later high school years, and then just shortly after high school, my brother had his own business, same business. So I'd work with him occasionally. We would meet his coworker from time to time, just casually. So finally I just said, do you think your brother, I could talk to your brother because I have questions about entertainment and blah, blah, blah. So all that big story comes back to Chuck gave me a couple names to contact out in LA, because some of the people that used to work with him at the local CBS in Cleveland moved out to LA and took on different careers. So I called, most of them didn't have much to offer, but one of them introduced me to a guy that used to have a studio in Cleveland. His name was Rick Reinert. And he worked for American Greetings for a long time, which was stationed in downtown Cleveland. But then he opened up his own little media group. And this is, again, late 60s, early 70s when he started. But they then worked for a media group that would produce commercials for industrial, internal industrial films, as well as some local commercials. Rick had a desire to work in the industry because when he started his career, he worked on Tom and Jerry. Then he moved back to Ohio, had a family, opened his little studio. No way. But then he moved his studio back out to LA. So then Rick got some work out here in his later years. And ironically, got to meet Rick. Rick didn't have any work. So I had traveled all the way out to LA, looking around my shackle portfolio. And he connects me back to Cleveland again, because the guy that used to work for him moved back to Cleveland and opened a small studio. So here I am in my early 20s, feeling like my dreams were shot down in LA, but then I had this opportunity back in Cleveland. So my first job was painting cells on a Winnie the Pooh special. It was the first special that Disney subcontracted out of the Disney studios.
Wow.
And Rick Reinert produced it. So his ink and paint girls lived in Cleveland because they'd never moved to LA. So he said, contact them. I got some work. Maybe you can help them out. They gave me work. I have pictures of myself painting those cells way back when I was such a doofus nerd there. I didn't even get credit on the film, but I was so delighted to do anything, and so I learned cell painting, which was great. After about 6 months of that dried up. Nothing else was coming, but through them, that guy, his name is Ennis McNulty, owe so much to him. I believe he's still around, lives in Cleveland. He's probably in his early 80s now. But Ennis started a small commercial studio, and I got to meet him through the ink and paint girls because they were doing work for him. Obviously I was spawning and begging with my passion. It's like, whatever you do. So I got hired as the coffee boy, copy boy. So it was just, Ennis was the lead creative. He had a partner. His name was John Gibble. Sadly, had passed several years back, but John was the business. and that was it. So they hired me as the apprentice intern. So I could not have been more delighted. So I made the best goddamn coffee and coffee you'd ever want. But it was again, two-man setup, traditional animation. Ennis would do all of the we did commercials primarily. He was able to get enough commercial work, and he's a terrific artist. But he had 30 years of experience under his belt when he started this group, so he's soup to nuts, traditional artist. So he, for the commercial work, in order to make any kind of money on it, he tried to do as much work as he could on his own. So he would board it. They would get in with the clients, get the thing set up. Animation, there were a few different studios and animators that we could access for freelance because they're 30-second commercials, so you wouldn't send a lot of footage.
Sure.
But he ended up training me to do the Xeroxing, which was literally you'd scan the drawing through a Xerox machine, you'd print it out on acetate, you'd have to strip off the pegs, then you'd have to put it back on your desk and line up the drawing so that everything would not jump all over the screen and tape it all down. And you do that for everything, so that was my entree into real animation. But I tell you, I would have done it for free. I was just so like, oh my God.
Love it.
So we did that. And through that, the relationships, this all does accumulate back to Batman. But one of the animators that helped Ennis out, his name is Greg Duffel, and he's a Canadian artist. And he was in Toronto, had his own studio. So Greg Duffel, brilliant animator, wonderful person. Met him a couple of times when he came down to visit Ennis. So now I'll jump from my Cleveland beginning. So I was learning everything. I was shooting on the camera, learned how to do effects, all of it. So in designing and even animating some of the stuff.
Wow.
Because we did several different commercials. So once the fancier ones were done, Ennis gave me a lot more leeway, and he would sort of let me do a little bit more. So it was like the best education in the world. I worked for him for about 2.5 years. And then Rick, surprisingly, got another project and knew I was looking, and he offered me a job in LA. So I was just, what? It couldn't find it. Wow. So I packed up my little shitty car and drove out, across the country and came out and started working for Rick. And it was sort of a 2 steps up from Ennis, in that now I had some, actual practical skills. So then I started working with, and Rick was a small studio too. Rick was the lead, and he's a painter. So he did all the background work, but it was his studio.
Okay.
Dave Bennett was his lead director, but Dave did directing and storyboard and layout and design and everything. And then he had an assistant that was just like, the receptionist sort. So I came in to assist Dave, and Dave started teaching me layout and boards and design. So again, we were a small studio. We subcontracted all of our animation to an Argentinian studio. The guy's name was Jaime Diaz. He's since passed, but he was an original Hanna-Barbera artist. Wow. And he had opened a studio in Argentina, and he subcontracted for Rick. So we had this, we would do all of the prep work, all the boards, all the design, all of the color background work. Jaime would do the animation and cleanup. We would get the ink and paint done, and then we'd film down in Hollywood. That there were traditional animation cameras still in use. Wow. And so I used to do all that work, and then I also had the duty of driving, all the way from, if you're not familiar with the West Coast, Rick had his studio for whatever reason. It was close to his house, but it's about 20 miles west of LA. So I'd have to drive from there to down into Hollywood.
Oh no!
Thousands of cells in my car. Oh, cameraman to film everything. But that was again, just it was education on top, because then Rick started teaching me actual background painting. So I learned painting from him. After those couple of years with Rick, almost 3, couple of years with Ennis, then I was like feeling my oats a little bit in terms of I had enough experience, but I also had enough of a exposure to the way film is made, and animation and the process and how to do everything. But I had a hankering to just paint. So I I decided, which, you always look back on those decisions like, what the hell was I thinking? Because I bought my first house, my first wife and I,
Mhm.
uh, uh, and just bought a house, and I decided I was going to give up Rick and just go freelance. So
Oh
it's like,
my gosh.
great idea. Be a painter,
Wow.
illustrator, and I'd never done it. So I did it. And for about 6 months, I picked up work here and there. I did some weird, I was trying to recall the details of it, but nonetheless, at the Florida Disneyland, if you guys remember, it used to be a thing called Circle Vision, where
Okay.
you stand and would play a 360 film,
Uh-huh.
and they had different effects. This is obviously old school, but it was like an IMAX camera, and you'd stand in the middle of the room, but the camera you could turn around and you were like on a raft down the river and everything, and it was live action. But the wraparound was an animated characters specific to that. A guy that I had worked with Greg from Canada. Somehow they got my info and hired me to animate. So I animated this lion character that was the Circle Vision sort of host. So I did that for freelance for a little bit, and
Wow.
just whatever I could get, putting together my artwork. And then I'd heard Warner Brothers was starting. They were opening up again. This was like '89. So
Okay.
I thought, well, maybe I can get some freelance work from there, because they were literally like a month old. And I went in, showed my portfolio to a guy named Ken Boyer, who was my director eventually, but he was one of the directors on Tiny Toons, and they were just starting to put crews together. So I showed him my book. He loved it. I said, I'm looking for freelance. He said, well, would you like a job full time? And I was like, well, I'm not sure, because the naive me, stupid me. And I'm like, oh, maybe freelance. And then he told me what the salary was. And I'm like, what? I couldn't, it's like weekly salary, and I don't have to go and schlep for work. So, it was like, and I get to paint all day. So it was glorious, because it was Tiny Toons, sort of comedy. That's kind of all I'd been trained on.
Yeah.
And I just had to learn the style, but learn that pretty quick. And that ended up being a couple of years of just painting with three other background
Wow.
painters.
Oh man, these conversations, these stories that Eric is telling us are so much fun, and we'll get right back to it in just a minute, Cal. But first, let's remind the folks at home that if you'd like to support the podcast, if you want us to keep doing what we're doing, and give us the thumbs up, there's a great way that you can support us monetarily, and that is, of course, at buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review.
That's right, Liam. Buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review is the best way to support the podcast. Buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review is the best way to support the podcast. And if you would like to encourage us to keep going out there, keep getting interviews like this that you're hearing today with the great Eric Radomski, then why not head over and encourage us by becoming a supporter of the podcast there. You can become a one-time supporter of the podcast. Say, hey, you know what? I really dig what you guys are doing. Appreciate it. I'd love to hear more of this behind the scenes stuff here. I'm going to buy you a cup of Java just to say thanks. Maybe you love what we're doing here. Maybe you say, you know what? I love what you guys are doing. I see what you're doing, but you know what want you to do? I want you to give me something for my money. I'm not just buying you coffee and getting nothing in return. Well, maybe you want to become a monthly supporter of the podcast. If you become a monthly supporter of the podcast, you can get perks for being a supporter. That's right. We have 3 different levels to support the podcast. And if you join us at our Super Friend tier, you have the opportunity to ask us a question and hear your question answered on the air about the episode that we're reviewing that week. So if you want to become a one-time supporter of the podcast or a monthly supporter of the podcast, we invite you, head on over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review, and please consider supporting our podcast today.
Absolutely. And without any further ado, let's continue our conversation with Batman the Animated Series co-creator, Eric Radomski.
So it was delightful. It was just like dreams come true to a degree. I never thought, anything beyond that. And that brings us finally.
There we go. To the main event here. That's right.
Yeah, the main event. The success of Tiny Toons, the success of Tim Burton's first Batman movie.
For sure.
Warner Brothers opened the doors to about 6 different titles that they were considering, IP, they were considering developing. So I did artwork for all of them. Just, it's like, I'll
You
work
remember
on
what
it.
the other ones were?
One was the Griswolds, if you remember
Oh
from,
my goodness.
yeah. So they were going to do a
National
family
Lampoons.
comedy about that. There was what ended up becoming Tasmania, but it was just
Yeah.
Tasmanian Devil. So I
Yeah.
did a bunch of stuff with the classic characters. Gremlins,
Okay.
and gosh, there must have been one more, but I can't remember what it was. And Batman, obviously, and that was, yeah, I think that was it. There may have been one more. But so I did artwork for all, just as like, longevity. It was like, okay, if Tiny Toons is going away, I need a job. So
Sure.
there you go. So Batman was, like I said, included in that. I did some piece for that, but that ties back into my earlier conversation about Cleveland and Godfather and Dark and Moody, because having seen
Right.
Tim Burton's movie,
Mm-hmm.
that was probably the biggest appeal for me, because it was the first time, obviously, I saw a Batman that I never knew before. So I was totally taken with it.
Right.
A lot of the guys used to give me shit, making Batman animated, because it's like, you like, Tim Burton's movie, because a lot of them had issues with it.
Sure.
I was like, dude, this is terrific. It's because it was new to me. I was
Absolutely.
like delighted. So that, along with thinking that something different than obviously the Adam West sort of
Yeah.
campiness. And then obviously by that time I'd become aware of Batman comics and
Sure.
the different incarnations that were out there, but I didn't really dive into that world much. So the combination of that, and then the Godfather, moodiness of it all, leaping off of Tim's movie and sort of blending that
Yeah.
recollection of the art direction from the Godfather. I put together this, and at the time too, I was a big admirer of an illustrator that was pretty successful by then, almost at the end of his career, named Bernie Fuchs. And there were other guys, Bob Peak, and there was a collective group, about 5 or 6 guys that were known as like the top illustrators at the time. But they had a technique where it was very limited. They would do like oil washes and then wipe stuff away and just put details.
Okay.
So that always appealed to me. So a combination of the minimal details, the darkness of the Godfather, and obviously the drama of Tim Burton's movie, as well as the darkness. I did a painting that was based on a painting I'd done for my mom of a Cleveland street. My brother still has the painting of a street with just street lights, and it was dark and everything. So I was like, that's what I want to do. So I just did a couple pieces of artwork and thought, well, if I don't know if they'll ever do it, but this is my interpretation of how I would do it for animation. Simultaneously, Bruce, who we obviously knew each other at the studio, but the way Tiny Toons was set up, it was old school, where they had 5 unit directors, and then they each had their own crew. So they'd each have a couple board guys, a character designer, background designer, and then background painters, each assigned. And sometimes they'd cross over. But Bruce was a storyboard artist for Art Vitello, who was one of the directors, and Ken Boyer was my director. So we'd see each other in the hall, and I admired his work all the time. He was, just very good, but very, it was very much kept to himself. Bruce's personality was, very much
like introvert, right?
Thank you, introvert, ultimate introvert. And later in my my late comer to the knowledge of comic book guys, he was a traditional comic book guy. So he was totally comfortable sitting in his cubicle reading books and drawing, and he didn't need to socialize much. But we got him out eventually. He would hang out with the background painters, and we'd have some good times. But so we didn't really work together specifically, but we knew of each other. And I know that similarly, the Batman, the development that opened up, I don't think Bruce did anything else but the Batman pitch, because that was, I later came to know and have, really appreciated that he had been a Batman fan his entire life. I mean, it was just like glory project.
Right.
So he banged out that original sheet that everybody's seen of the characters and submitted one sheet of characters, and I had I think 2 backgrounds I did. And we put them in the mix and went back to our day jobs, and then, the story is, as everyone's heard before, we were approached to put together a piece that would represent, what we thought the show might be like. And we were both, I think, equally, if we can work on this show, this is, glory. This is great. We had no concept that they were going to ask us to make the show. We just thought we were going to work on it. So and then, they slammed us together, and we both just kind of blindly walked into this going, okay, we'll figure it out as we go, I guess. And then we brought it down the Batman path. But
yeah. Wow. Quite the winding journey there.
Yes.
Man, that's like, what an origin story to get from there to having not really any connection to the character to really honestly, or a median connection to the character. And then ultimately being responsible for setting the pace for what would be Batman, what people would judge Batman for the next decades or so. Just absolutely incredible. One of the questions we had was about that now famous short that you guys put together that they dubbed The Dark Knight's First Night. I don't know if that was the original title that you guys had.
I don't think we even had a title.
Whatever. I watched it again today before we started the interview. It's like 2 minutes, and it's just something that, like, when you watch it, I was trying to put it in my head. Like, obviously the excitement of Batmania, as they dubbed it, is coming out. Warner Brothers is, let's get some IP out here. Maybe if you're, if you're thinking of like corporate synergy in a negative light, you're like, man, they're just hoping to make extra dollars off of an exciting IP right at this point, right? Like, they don't really care. But man, as the story goes, I think even Dan Reba when we had him on, he mentioned receiving, like, seeing the tape that got passed around of that original short and being so excited about it. He may have gotten it from, I think he said from Paul Dini or somebody sent it. And like the work that you guys did on that and setting the tone for it, it's 2 minutes. There's no dialogue at all. It's just fist punching Batman. It says so much though about the universe that you guys would set up, and that, it communicates Batman being this scary sort of creature that the criminals are afraid of, and has maybe an adversarial relationship with the police, which was completely different than the Adam West Batman. But the scenery and the criminals and the noir style and the Godfather influence, all of that, you can feel that in this 2 minute little short that you guys did. What do you remember about the reception for that? Because from what I've heard, people were like, "Oh my gosh, I want to be a part of this. Like, I want to be part of this Batman." And people were super excited about it. It sounds like that's generally what the reception was.
Yeah, and again, it follows exactly where I just left off, that we were handed this opportunity to put together a test, and it was our opportunity to sort of spread our wings a little bit based on what we'd pitched. And it's like, okay, now what is it? How would you do this? So Bruce and I just literally just talked briefly about what we think it should be in terms of presentation. And again, hindsight, you want to, maybe embellish more than you should. We were both just looking to keep our jobs, and it's like we had there's no way we could have guessed. Not only would it have gotten that sort of reaction, but that it would have turned into what it turned into. So we just, used our skill sets. Bruce boarded it. I contributed a few shots to where we were figuring out some transitions and things, but that's testament to Bruce's sort of not only love of the character, but knowledge of the character, and obviously the influences that he brought to the storytelling from not only the comics, but I guess, whether he would admit it or not, the take of Tim Burton's movie, where it just leaned into a different take that others hadn't seen before. And for me, it was, trying to bring to life the that sample that I'd done. So we just plowed through it. We got a stipend of money. The real cool thing about it was, back to my origin story, because I'd had, anyone at Warner Brothers only knew me as a background painter. They had no idea that I had track record of, running a production essentially, or at least knowing the production from soup to nuts. So I just sort of grabbed it up, and I was completely confident we could do this. So Bruce was putting his boards together. I knew that we needed layout crew and, X amount of designs. And it's like, well, who the hell's going to animate this? I call my friend Greg Duffel. I had talked to him in years, but studio was still going. And I asked him if he'd be interested. He was all over it. He said, yes, absolutely. I did, Ted Blackman did the background designs. And Ted was he on Bruce's? No, he was on yet a third crew. So Ted did the background designs, drawings. I painted all the original backgrounds so that Warner Brothers owns all that stuff. I wish they'd put that stuff out there. It's a lot of like walls and windows and stuff, but nonetheless, it was all done in studio. I painted all that stuff originally. And then Bruce had done just the model sheet and the boards, and then we didn't do any character layout. It was all just the boards, the backgrounds. I think we did the timing, and because there was no dialogue, we waited till the end to put in the grunts and groans and things. So we talked with Greg, told him what we needed. He basically started building it out, would send us some test animation, we'd give him notes, etc., and brought it back together, assembled it in LA, did the edit, we lifted track music, and Bruce and I did the grunts and groans for most of the stuff.
That's awesome.
And then, yeah, it was kind of cool. And then, the basic visual effects, which again, they were old school handmade stuff, any kind of smoke. And I think there's some reflections and things like that. Gunshots. A lot of that stuff was practical that Greg had done. So they turned it into us. We loved it. We cut it together, showed within the studio. Technically, I think they were already planning on making the show, but they still didn't know what it was going to be.
Sure.
So back in the days, we had everything on film, did everything on film, but video was becoming sort of the way that directors could do their notes and reviews and things. So it was put to video, and obviously purposely leaked by whoever, to everyone. And once we started hearing the feedback, we were just like, really? It's like, I mean, we were happy with it, but people were clamoring to know. Most people were like, there's no way you guys are making this show. And it's like, that's the show they're doing. And until we actually, it was announced that it was being made, and that was the art direction, then, the gates were open for as many people as, and again, then you would hope that it's like, well, we'll just pick and choose who we like. We already had gotten a schedule and a budget, and it's like in a delivery date. So it was like all hands on deck. So we pulled whoever we could. We were limited in pulling people because Tiny Toons was transitioning to Animaniacs, and a lot of crews, the directors were like, no, hands off. You can't.
You can't take my guys, right?
Can't steal our guys. So we, there were some that we had talked to Gene McCurdy, our boss at the time, about, they had a desire. So we, I would typically negotiate the pleasantries. So, it's like these people really are passionate about doing this. I think it'd be good for the studio to show that they're not locked in. So a few of the people came from the crews, and then other people start coming from the outside because we had to audition folks. So some of the folks, a lot of the folks we'd never worked with before. You'd go based on a portfolio. Hardly anybody had anything similar because nothing had been done to that degree before. So you're kind of guessing who you think would be able to support what we were trying to do. And again, it was back in the day where we got a 65 episode order right up front. So that's two and a half years worth of work, and it's a lot of work. I mean, that's a monster that we never, we'd come off of Tiny Toons, which was 65, but we were just production artists. Now it's like, no, it's all on your neck, and you're like, holy shit. So we were pulling people in where we could. Originally, there was a desire, I think it was pushed upon us a little bit to have a layout crew in studio, but everything, we had done in Tiny Toons and the industry in general was shipping stuff overseas to Japan and Korea. So we knew we would be doing some of that, but we were trying to maintain the quality by doing layout in-house. And that only lasted maybe 3 to 6 months. And it just wasn't working out. We had a ton of people, but the quality wasn't benefiting us, and overseas had their own methods. So they would get layouts and they're like, we don't know what to do with this stuff because it's not the way we do it. So it ended up going away, but we ended up, I think when we really hit our stride, we probably had about 70 total staff. That means
Wow.
writers, assistants,
Yeah.
all of the support staff. So, suddenly Bruce and I are responsible for a staff of 70, and it's like, Jesus Christ. And obviously I failed to, mention Alan Burnett was handling all the writing because Bruce and I, neither of us had any writing experience. So God bless us that Alan Burnett, finally made his way over, because we started with, we were sort of assigned a couple writers. Sean Derrick and Laren Bright had come over. Their experience was from Hanna-Barbera, and I think maybe Tom Ruger might have sort of had them come over just to get us started. But their take was completely, Hanna-Barbera Filmation sort of mentality. And Bruce and I were like, oh shit, this isn't going to work at all. And to the degree of like they're pitching like Batman should have a dog and
Right.
recycling container in the Bat Cave, and we were like, oh no. So it ended up, it was just bumping heads. We weren't making progress. Bruce and I lobbied Gene to say this isn't, it's just not working. And it wasn't just two young guys, stomping their feet.
Right.
We saw the quality of the writing and they were like, no, this doesn't match. So thank goodness. Gene knew Alan. Alan was still at Disney, I think, finishing up, and he wasn't convinced until he saw this tape. And then he was like, I think he said it in some interview where he told Gene, he's like, you are telling me we can make this show with guns and police and fighting? And she said, yes, that's the show we're making. And that was supposedly, again, the bonus of that short was that it convinced Alan to come over. And with his experience and his calm demeanor and knowing Gene as well as, what was her name? It's just slipping me now. It'll come to me. She was the Fox executive. They had confidence in Alan that they weren't going to have to wrestle with Bruce and I in terms of what we were trying to do. Alan brought calm to it, and then he had a similar challenge where he had to find writers. Deanie wasn't on from the beginning. He was, somewhere between Animaniacs and not wanting to do anything at all. And then finally, Alan convinced him to write a couple episodes. So Paul eventually became, Paul of Batman Animated, but he was, he wasn't buying it in the beginning either. And turns out writing some better episodes. But Alan had to assemble as many writers as he could get, again, because all of this stuff in a production model, everything is overlap. So as you're starting one, you're in the middle on another, and you're finishing the third, and they just keep going. So you've got to have a writer, starting something else, because once the director delivers his part here, he's got to have another script to start storyboarding. Otherwise, the schedule gets blown and the budget goes through the roof. So it was a symphony, and like I said, thank God for Alan and his ability to pull off as good a quality writing, consistently as he could. And then, we managed to finally pull a crew together that could, at least be in the zone of what we were trying to do. So
For sure.
so that short served as a real incredible calling card. And again, we can take credit for that now, but that was not the intention. We were just trying to figure out how the show was going to work. So
That's awesome.
it's bonus.
Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then of course you're credited kind of with coining that term of the dark deco aesthetic that became, one of the calling cards of the show. I know you already mentioned that some of the backgrounds you painted for the short were based on a previous painting you had done, but what the calling card probably of all is the backgrounds on black paper, right? Were you just hearing that you were a heretic for wanting to do that in animation at the time?
Oh, I got a story for you. I'll share it as we go.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
Yeah. So question,
And
what specifically you want to?
Yeah. So was there resistance to adopting this sort of approach? And then what does it kind of mean to you now looking back when that signature aesthetic is a large part of, I think, why people are still loving this show and introducing it to their kids and things, 35 years later, that,
Sure.
you sticking to your guns back then, created something so iconic.
Yeah. Well, the dark deco, again, I never coined that phrase, and I'm not sure how it came about, but it was an accurate phrase of how dark the show was. And it happened to be that we fell in love with the deco aesthetic that, was pervasive throughout all of the design, from the vehicles, the basic props to the vehicles to the background, or the buildings and furniture and all of that. So I don't know who gets credit. God bless them, whoever they
You
are.
can take credit for it,
Yeah.
Eric. You can say it's you.
But the painting on black, again, it was exactly what I'd done as my presentation piece. It was a style and a technique that proved itself through the demo piece, the short that we just talked about. So for me, it solidified the pitch that technically it would work. I only had to convince, everybody, including overseas, that is if they adopt it the way that it's intended, it's actually easier than traditional painting, because and I could argue it because it's like, because I'm a painter. I painted on a traditional show, and one of the things I've said previous is that once we knew what we were up against and we were painting, an entire city, essentially New York City, it's like, I don't want to paint every one of those buildings. It's like, this is a nightmare. It's like, what the hell are we thinking? So the technique lended itself to suggesting the environment as opposed to being, required to show every detail. So it was that conversation over and over again, even with overseas, that finally people were able to understand how it needed to work. And it had its challenges because, again, this was at a time that everything was done traditionally and hand on and painted. So even the idea of the density of the cells over the black, at times caused problems. You would see a lot more of the dirt on the cells, and they'd have to keep it extremely clean. If it would get too dense, you would start to lose some of the detail, but that was we just had to figure out ways of minimizing it, taking advantage of it. But nonetheless, the overall presentation of it and the technical side of it proved efficient, and so it had to make practical sense. Being able to do it on time and for the budget that we were working with, and thank goodness for the painters that we hired, John Calmette, Russell Chong, Steve Butts, and eventually Charles Pickens. They got the style immediately. So as they started to knock out their, what we used to call comps, they were just small samples of each sequence of each show to give the overseas a guide as to what the factory looks like from the exterior and the interior and the details. Because they were able to blast out as much as they could, it was, again, proof to the theory that it's like they can move a lot quicker if you do it the way that we teach you to do it. So that required going overseas. So I spent, time in Japan and Korea, working with the studios and trying to get them on board as to how to, make adjustments so that they could, they could work within the desired art direction that we put forward. And again, even from a technical, using an airbrush, you've got to have ventilation, because those days, it was a big deal. You'd have to wear a mask sometimes because you're breathing all these fumes and crap, and that had its own challenges. But again, everybody adapted to it, and it ended up working well. The story, which I'll keep brief, I had a knockdown drag out with one of the heads of the studio in Japan, because he was known to be a pretty stern personality, rightfully so, because it was TMS, but they were known for just incredible quality, and I couldn't argue with it. But when you're explaining a technique that's like, it's pretty hard to argue, is to say, no, you see, if you go A, B, and C, it moves quicker and it looks like the show. And his attitude was, I'm obviously, if you can call it paraphrasing between his Japanese and my English, he was basically going, there is no effing way I'm painting on black, so I'm going to do it my way. So when we gave them a sample that they had done, I'm trying to remember what they did for us. Gosh, I can't remember. We were having them test a piece, And they started with they literally, this is how frustrating it was. They would paint the whole background black anyway, and then just paint it traditionally instead of airbrushing on black board. But it was just that I think a lot of that had to do with the ego and the stubbornness. And it was just like, whatever it takes, guys, because as long as you can make it look like that, that's the way you want to do it, then God bless you. But everybody else seemed to kind of line up and finally get it. So yeah, it was a challenge to get people to believe in it. And from the very beginning, even again, a calling card of that short, even Warner Brothers, the studio and the executives, they were all like, "Oh, it's too dark, it's too dark, too dark, too dark, too dark, too dark." And it was like now, all of them have taken their share of the credit for it, and God bless them, enjoy their credit. But it was an uphill battle. They were just terrified of something they had never done before. And the fact that it played out, thank goodness for Alan, Bruce, and I, that it's like whew.
Thank you for sticking to your guns, because is even like once a week on Twitter, I'll see the same post go by where it's just backgrounds from Batman the Animated Series, and it'll say, look at the aesthetic from Batman the Animated Series, and it's just backgrounds. Batman's not anywhere in it. It's like Gotham City from Batman the Animated Series. Like,
that's really cool.
I think so many people look at that and say, you made, with those decisions and you guys sticking to your guns on that, Gotham City became its own characteristic, like its own character in the show, and separated and created a defined look for what Gotham looks like. We talk about the way that the buildings are shaped and all that, and the way that the characters move, sure, but like the backgrounds themselves are just so ingrained and such an important part of what the show ended up being. It's just incredible.
That's great. Yeah, and I'd love to have another stab at it. I wished that I would have been allowed, more recently to do something with it, because now technology has allowed to take a lot of the flaws out and a lot of restrictions, which would only allow you to make it better. Not to change it at all, but to do it the way that that it could have been done had you more time and money to really finesse stuff. But we had to fly like, seat of our pants to get the stuff done. So you'd have to make some compromises, but that's really cool to hear. And, again, a testament to all of the incredible talent that worked on the show that made, you can have an idea, but until you get other people that really support it and do what they do, John Calmette in particular, we're still good friends. We stay in touch all the time, but he's just a master. I mean, he's twice the painter I am. He's so talented, and he got the style and just made it so much better. And it's like, it's just, it's so exciting to see what it is. And it's that because of the talent that, was around. And I mean, the whole show, all of the people that contributed, it's like, it just, it was such a gift. And such a unique time and place. I'm so grateful to have been part of it. It's really cool.
Well, before we go, we'll allow some time. We know, as you mentioned at the beginning, you're getting out on the road here for at least one. Well, you're doing a couple of different things. You got your website, artbyradomski.com. We know that you're doing some stuff there, selling stuff, some prints. So I'll let you pitch it and talk about it. But we also know you're making some appearances also, or at least one big appearance here at the end of the month.
Yep. Well, art-wise, it's artbyradomski.com. It's a new website. Prints, merchandise, t-shirts, coffee mugs, all that good stuff with my original artwork. So the stuff behind me are black and whites of the prints are available in color as well, but those are very specific to the Batman universe, but they're completely just my own, just for the fun of doing Batman. But all of my other stuff is sort of a collection of different art that I've done. I've never been sort of a person that's focused on one specific style. It's just not my thing. I always feel and have enjoyed being a bit of a chameleon. Each project demands its own sort of take. So try to bring, life to stuff from my own perspective. So my fine art it's a collection of different things. There's some more realistic impressionistic paintings, some abstract stuff, but all of it is inspired and generated by my experience, through my career, as well as, you'll see the hints and relationships to the cartoon world, just both from the comedic all the way to the dramatic. And it's just something I've always wanted to do, never had time to do because, life demands you work for a living. And now it's, it's the first time I get to do something without taking any notes from anybody. And with that said, love it, hate it. If you look at it and you love it, great. I hope you pick something up if you think it's, something you'd like. But if not, I'm totally cool with that as well, because this is, it's a bit selfish on my part. It's like, I'm just doing what I love.
You deserve it.
Yeah, thank you. I have a small company with a couple partners, and we're continually trying to develop new IP and, live within the parameters of our changing industry, which is becoming more and more difficult, but a lot of different projects yet to be seen. So nothing to announce, but we're always out there plugging and trying to get some new stuff done. And then the first time going to be actually at the Fan Expo Anaheim, June 26th through the 28th, with the Heroic Fine Art Gallery group, which includes Dan Reba, Kevin Altieri, I believe Paul Dini will be there, Alan Burnett may be there, Tom Ruger, who was our executive producer at Warner Brothers during the Batman days, and Mark Hamill is guest of the entire event. So wow. It's the first time I'll be signing there. We're doing the autograph session. I'll have some of my stuff there, as well as the organizers are going to have some prints of my stuff. So whether you buy stuff or you don't, you want an autograph or you don't, come by and say hello. It's the first time I'm really getting out there. My wife is handling my social media, which I've never been part of, never had Facebook or any of that. Now I'm getting into the 21st century finally.
There you go.
So it's a little awkward for me, but in person, I'm more than happy to meet and talk with folks. I'm excited about it, and they've extended the offer that should I be comfortable with it and other opportunities come for the future, I may do, other conventions and things like that as we go forward. Sort of, that's the new chapter of my career that I'm getting into. So getting out there and actually hand to hand with the fans and admirers of the of the biz. So pretty excited about it. So I appreciate the opportunity to plug, share it with everybody, repost everything if you can.
Absolutely.
All of it helps, just trying to get the word out. So
absolutely. Yeah. If you're interested in following Eric on Instagram, it's Eric Radomski Studio is his handle there. Check that out. And I think you're Art by Radomski on Facebook. That's where we connected. So definitely check that out. Give him a follow. Lots of cool, neat stuff that he's been posting there, or I guess your wife has been posting.
Yeah.
Shout out to her.
Well, thank you once again to Eric for all of the time he spent with us. As Cal mentioned up top, we have a part 2 that will be dropping in a couple weeks, so stay tuned. We barely scratched the surface. It feels like even after both parts, we might still feel like this. So hopefully we'll be able to have Eric on many more times after these next couple of weeks. But just want to say thank you to Eric once again, and to reiterate, as he mentioned there, that you can actually go and meet Eric along with several of the other BTAS creators and writers and directors over at Fan Expo Anaheim. Eric is appearing with Heroic Fine Arts, and will be appearing June 26th through the 28th. So if you're listening and you're in that area, be sure to go see Eric, and hey, tell him we sent you. But really just go, maybe buy a print and say thanks for helping create this wonderful show. But man, Cal, it was so much fun just getting to talk to Eric and appreciate all the time he spent with us today. And we appreciate anyone who spent time with us today. And hopefully you will continue to do it next week when we return to our regularly scheduled programming with a regular episode review. And in the meantime, if you want to get in touch with us, you can hit us up on the socials at DCAU Review. You can find us mostly active on Instagram and Twitter/X, but you can also find us on those other ancillary sites. And as Cal mentioned earlier, great ways to support us more directly, more monetarily, if you will. You can head to the show notes and you'll find a link to our store there where you can pick yourself up a hat or a mug or something. That's a great way to support us. Or you can, of course, head to the best way to support us, which is buymeacoffee.com/DCAU Review. And of course, you also want to make sure you're subscribed to us wherever you listen to your podcast. Just make sure you click that subscribe button. If it lets you rate us 5 stars, give us 5 stars. If it lets you write a review, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, write a review. All of that really helps us. And also check the show notes. Make sure you're subscribed to us on YouTube as we try to build that platform up for us a little bit again. So appreciate everybody. But Cal, without any further ado, let's take a look. If I remember correctly, we are still in Supergirl month, aren't we?
Yeah, that is correct. And we are, after our brief detour here for the holiday weekend, we will be returning to celebrate the Girl of Steel. And in fact, we will be taking a look at her final appearance in the DC animated universe in one of the final episodes of Justice League Unlimited as we review the season 3 episode of Justice League Unlimited, Far From Home, that sees Supergirl launched into the future with a pair of her Justice League compadres to team up with a legion of superheroes to help defeat a familiar set of foes that may or may not come back later on in a direct-to-video Justice League Unlimited movie. So, lots of stuff to talk about next week as we head to the future, Liam.
The future, Cal?
That's right, Liam, all the way to the 31st century, that is, with next week. So.
Absolutely. Can't wait to talk about month, celebrate the new movie heading into theaters, coincide with that movie's releasing next weekend. So hopefully that's good, and hopefully you'll come back and listen to our review next week. But until then, I'm Liam.
And I'm Cal.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Adios.